Welcome to Municipal Affairs. We had the opportunity last month to travel to Haines Junction, Yukon, to take part in a major milestone, the 50th anniversary of the Association of Yukon Communities. Now, over the 3-day convention, more than 150 delegates from across the territory gathered to talk about the shared challenges, common goals, and the future of their communities. One theme that came up over and over again was the need for more support around recreation, how vital programs and spaces are to the health and well-being of Yukon communities. Now, during the convention, we had the pleasure of sitting down with Caroline Sparks from the Recreation and Parks Association of Yukon, or RPAY. We talked about how the work RPAY is doing to empower Yukoners to lead to more active, healthy lives, and how they're partnering with communities across the territories and organizations across the territory and governments to create better recreational opportunities across the territory.
Caroline, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about your organization and how your organization works alongside municipalities and LACs in the Yukon territory. I was about to say the province of Yukon, but the Yukon territories. Before we get into the sort of how your organization helps, what is RPAY?
RPAY is a not-for-profit organization. We're a territorial organization. We have the mandate to support active and healthy living through recreation and parks, and as such are connected through the Parks and Rec sector nationally under the Canadian Parks and Recreation Association. RPAY is governed by a board, being a nonprofit, and I feel that being a nonprofit is actually a really nice position to be in because it allows the organization to be very creative with a limited amount of resources and serve the communities that perhaps have the most need or the most interest or the most unique interests in supporting recreation. And what I mean by that is over the last probably 30, 40 years, recreation in Canada shifted to a bit more of a who can pay for it type model. So after all the big facilities were built in the 70s, the governments realized they had to start collecting user fees. And so the cost of participating in recreation increased. And as a nonprofit, we can recognize where communities might not have those facilities, like a seasonal swimming pool. We can recognize where they might not have access to equipment like cross-country skis and snowshoes. And we can tailor our services in those ways. And I think that's something that, governments maybe are not as uniquely positioned to do. So it makes for a lot more accessibility and inclusivity in recreation experiences for all Yukoners.
So we talk about the idea that is recreation is those big facilities, those massive pools, gymnasiums, you name it, libraries attached to them. Do we need to get away from that model and look at more of a natural recreational experience for people?
I think it depends on where you are, geography.
In the Yukon, we're literally staring at one of the most magnificent town halls.
Exactly.
I should just do a shameless plug here, but we're recording this at the 50th anniversary of the Association of Yukon Communities. Continue.
Yeah, but you're looking at a community where the facilities are old, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of recreation facilities were built from the centennial funding of the government, so in the 70s. And so in the north, those facilities don't last very long. Their lifespan is a lot less than maybe what you would get down south. And so if you look at Haines Junction, the pool's closed, the curling rink's closed. And the cost for a small community to sort of not just even get the capital money to build that infrastructure, but it's the operations that's challenging. And I think that's where, I feel that we're very fortunate in the Yukon that there is a good support from Yukon government and federal government for capital investment. But what do you do with a community that gets, a $35,000 or $35 million arena or a $9 million pool and then can't find somebody to run it?
Yeah.
So, how about an arena that's in a community outside of Whitehorse and somebody from Whitehorse has to go and manage and maintain the ice, or a swimming pool in another rural community that can't open regularly because there's no staff? And a lot of that's a result of the pandemic. But those are really big, significant challenges. So to come back to your question, I think that we don't necessarily need to move away from maintaining what we have for facilities and recognizing that infrastructure is very, very important, but we need to find ways to fill those gaps. We need to do better with what we already have and make spaces where people can use those spaces for multi-purpose recreation in ways that don't rely on somebody with a key to open the door, the lights to be turned on, the heat to be turned up, all those things. So if we can find ways to do that in our communities, I think we can also host or offer a variety of different recreation opportunities. If you look at statistics, arenas are super important communities, but if you look at urban data on that, maybe a maximum of 20% of the population would ever use an arena.
Yeah.
Whereas a park or a playground, look at how much variety you get in those spaces.
So how do we get the mindset change then? Because right now there are probably mayors and councillors who might be listening to this across the territories, all three of them, who might be saying, that's great, but we want to build that $20 million facility. But when you have the access to the greatest area geographically for recreation, you don't need to build a pool because there's beautiful lakes all around you. How do we get the mindset change, and how does RPAY come into RPAY come into working with municipalities, working with LACs to sort of change the attitude and get people more interested in not the $1 million facilities, but the free facilities that we have access to?
Well, I think that links to some of the programs that RPAY does and also some of the initiatives of the Canadian Parks and Rec Association, where they're talking about placemaking and activating neighborhoods and community spaces, measuring impact. So, in some cases, those facilities might be very important, but I think we also need to look to examples from Scandinavian countries. There's a lot of good ones out of Denmark and Norway. Okay. Where they might have less space, they might need to build something, but they're maximizing the use that they really have. So looking at how would you design something that provides the right type of space for elders, the right type of space for children inside, maybe the right type of space for fitness classes or things like that, that's maybe smaller and a lighter footprint. So the design and the thinking about who's our population, who are our visitors, because we talked about visitors and how they might use those spaces. The opportunities, there's also sport tourism. So you look at Mount Sema, that's taken a good advantage of sport tourism, for example. But I think that, a community really needs to understand itself, because there's always going to be those voices that we need a year-round swimming pool, we need a bigger arena. But it's trying to figure out what people actually do, because often those voices are from the loud few, not from the many.
The old adage is 5% of the population is the loudest, 15% of the population looks after the 5%, and then the other 80% just don't do anything.
Exactly.
So I want to talk about the sort of the challenges, and challenge with around recreation comes down to money. We talked about it a little bit. Because when a facility fails, smaller communities cannot put in a lot of money to fix it. Where does the territorial and federal government need to come into play? And I'm kind of asking a political question, and I apologize if it comes out of left field, but I just sat down with a chairperson from an LAC of Mount... Lauren, yes, thank you. I knew you would know where it is. And he said, funding hasn't kept up. And trying to attract people to run the facilities is the hardest part. So there are facilities that aren't being open to their fullest capacity. So how do we fix that problem? Is it the territorial government needs to put a little bit more money in? Your organization needs to work with the municipalities? What's the golden solution here?
I don't know if there is a golden solution, and keep in mind this is my perspective as a contractor, but having worked for 40 years in the field of recreation, I think there's a number of different levels to your answer. So one is looking nationally. So if you look at the infrastructure, if you want to call it deficit or need, rural, remote communities have a way bigger share of public infrastructure and a way smaller share of people who have the ability to pay taxes to support those than do urban communities. So right there, that's a national issue, and something needs to change on a national level to reignite and reinvest in infrastructure in rural, northern, remote communities. So that's one piece. I think the second piece is a lot of our legislature that directs the way the funding flows to our unincorporated communities is old and outdated. We have a Recreation Act. That Recreation Act designates who is a local authority. So, for example, Keno is a local authority for recreation, but Mendenhall, which is a way bigger community, isn't. And it's because the Act hasn't been updated. The Act also has, the Act drives the CRAG funding outside of the block. So block funding comes to municipalities, but the CRAG funding goes to those local authorities or the local advisory associations. So it goes to the unincorporated communities. Yeah. The other reason the Act is problematic is, well, some parts of it, not the whole Act, I shouldn't say that. But the legislation itself also, by designating these local authorities, doesn't look at how the dynamic has shifted. So the City of Whitehorse is a local authority for recreation and receives block funding, of which they can take for recreation. But Kwanlin Dun First Nation, which is a self-governing First Nation situated within city limits for the City of Whitehorse, is not designated as a local authority for recreation. And so there's certain types of territorial funding that they can't access. So
seems very just like old school, like
it just
you
needs
are,
updating.
but and that's what it seems. It seems like. Do you think there's an appetite?
I think there always is, but I think, as you mentioned before, recreation often gets pushed to the back burner. So it's kind of like if you think of health, right? 99 or 98% of the entire budget on health is spent on reacting to things, right? And providing treatment and primary care and things like that. Maybe 1 or 2% is spent on prevention. So it's the same with recreation. Recreation is prevention. Like recreation is prevention, it's building communities, it's if you boil it down to 4 big sort of impact areas, there's individual health, so physical health, mental health, there's social health, and when people are healthier, they're more likely to, engage in their community. When a broader scope of people are connected through recreation in their community, they're more likely to want to make their community a better place to live, right? People who recreate outdoors are more likely to care about their environment. And all of these come down to economics, right? So you can, if somebody's healthy, they're not accessing the dollars somewhere else. But I think it's a hard sell or a hard way to think, because it's almost like reversing our thinking. It's like trying to dig through layers to get to the good that's there. And I think it's very easy to scratch on the surface because there are so many big issues in society today.
Okay, so there's something I want to talk about, and it's about that societal piece right now, because right now in Canada, we are seeing a massive influx of domestic tourism. And as a tourist myself who loves to go to communities, I look for communities that have things for me to do at night. And I will be the first to admit that municipalities, and I'm painting a very broad stroke here, and I hate to do it, but I'm going to. Municipalities do not know how to promote their recreational ability, their recreational things to do in their community that are literally on their back door. Okay, we have a walking trail. Okay, that's great. Every other community has a walking trail. Tell me what I can do in your community. How can municipalities promote their free recreation, their free parks that people can come see? Because as a tourist, I would want to come to a community and see what that community has to offer if there was a more of a golden egg or a golden sort of a thing that I could do in that community. How do we do that?
You're asking some tough questions today.
I'm sorry.
But that's okay.
But
I know what you're saying, though. Like, it's like
I tell you, like, when I talked to Diane Strand from Haines Junction, which we're sitting here in Haines Junction right now, she painted a broad picture and a very beautiful photo. It's like, oh my God, I'm looking forward to it. And then you get here and you're like, holy crap, pardon my French. This is much more spectacular. And it's not just that. I've been to many communities across Canada, even in Yellowknife and in Nunavut, and you don't really get it until you get there. How do we promote this recreational these parks, these recreational events that we have that we just don't seem to want to talk about that much because it's not a big issue?
Yeah, I guess there's a few ways to think about that. So promoting it, first of all, we have to even know what we have, right? So
Do you think we do?
I don't think some communities necessarily recognize, like you just said, oh, we have a walking trail. Well, the city of Whitehorse has more than 700 kilometers of developed trails. But until you start talking about what those trails look like and the fact that, me with my mountain bike could ride every day for an entire week and not touch every one. And then you start adding some imagery and stories and things. So I guess one of the things...
I can say that I got lost on the walking trail in Whitehorse. I almost fell into the Miles Canyon river, so don't go there if you're by yourself. That's all I'm saying.
But it is, I think sometimes we look beyond what we have because we're looking for that year-round, as a community, maybe you're looking for the year-round swimming pool or the better arena or something like that.
Does every community need a pool?
No. I don't think it's possible for every community to have the funding to, first of all, build a pool and then, more importantly, operate and staff it.
What does every community need from a recreational standpoint?
If you want to talk about water, every
or anything.
Kids. So let's take pool, for example.
Yeah.
Being able to swim is a life-saving skill.
Yes.
It's a survival skill. We live in environments where our kids and our adults need to know how to swim. Mm-hmm. So we need to think outside the box, not inside the swimming pool box, but outside. So how can we do that? So one of the programs that RPAY runs is a swim camp. So the swim camp has been in Old Crow, where they offer the swimming in the river, in Teslin in the lake, in Ross River, and hopefully this year here in Haines Junction in Pine Lake. So that swim camp is like a summer camp, but it's around swimming, and it brings the community
So the
together.
municipality hires RPAY to come in and run that program, or do they work in conjunction with them?
Well, in some cases, it's not a municipality. It might be the local authority, right? So
the community, I should say. Let's say the community.
Yeah. So ideally, the community would ask for RPAY to come. RPAY helps make those arrangements, helps cover the cost, and offers that as a service to communities. There's some, we've been sort of tossing around ideas like, can you imagine a mobile truck with a big sea can behind it that you can convert into a temporary swimming pool and place in a community and run swimming lessons for a month or something like that.
Awesome,
and then you can at least focus on the waterfront safety, which is the important part, right? Because we want kids to be safe, and water is an environment that, as Yukoners, we recreate in and live in and work around and access, fish and all those things from all the time. So water safety is super important. And then if you think about ice, for example, I mean, arenas are definitely places that bring whole communities together. You look at the native hockey tournament that just happened and how big that was in Whitehorse, right? Like those are really significant. And
you don't need a big giant $1 million facility. You can just do an outdoor skating rink with basically under a lean-to sometimes.
Yeah, you could do an outdoor skating rink. Sometimes, unfortunately, it does get a little cold. And
I forgot about that part about
wind
this.
and weather and things like that. But let's say you do have an arena. That's amazing, but what else can you do with that arena?
Yeah.
So how else could you use that arena? Is there a mezzanine that you can use as a youth center? What can you do in the summer? Can you roll out floorboards and have pickleball or tennis or basketball, or could you do what some Nunavut communities do and put an indoor playground in there so that it's a safe place for kids to go in the summertime? So there might be a number of different ways to use the space. So sometimes those facilities are good, but enhance them. Or when I was in Watson Lake, they had the Lipizzaner Stallions came and did a show in the Watson Lake Arena. So that was a long time ago. Which leads to the other part about promoting what's in your community. And our northern communities have some amazing festivals and special events. And I think that's another way to get people to your community. If somebody can come for a special event that involves maybe especially a cultural event, right? Like Indigenous culture is so rich, and it's really inspiring.
I want to just sort of pick up on that for a second, because rural Canada, and I say rural Canada as the broad stroke of rural Canada, the challenge there right now lies in the population base dwindling. But recreation is needed. It is good for mental health. It is good for mobility. It's good for safety, swimming. What does the future of recreation look like in your eyes? And okay, I'll start with an easier question, then I'll go to that one. What does the future of RPAY look like?
So where's RPAY going?
Yeah, in the next 5-10 years, do you see it expanding to more and more programs like the swimming program we talked about, or do you see it sort of trying to find its space in today's world where recreation isn't the thing that people talk about, but they should be?
Yeah, I think RPAY's done an amazing job. They have great support from Yukon Government Sport and Recreation Branch, and there's also funding through the Public Health Agency of Canada that flows in. I'm a little concerned about, like, that funding's been in place for a long time now, and I'm concerned that with the major issues that we're facing these days, that at some point in time that funding will be reduced. But I think RPAY's positioned itself to be able to provide programs and services with very little resources. And so, showing people that a toy shed. So I don't know if you saw the pictures that we have of these toy sheds, but instead of a toy box, it's like the playhouse you dreamed of when you were a child, with really cool pictures and posters of games and hula hoops. Like putting that in a central location with a bench beside it so that me as grandma can watch my granddaughter play. And maybe having a fire pit there or something like that. Like those are the types of things that I think we're almost going back to our roots in recreation, because recreation started in more than a century ago as something for people who couldn't get out of cities. So it was parks in cities with green spaces and benches and playgrounds.
Well, I'd say still there's some people today who can't get out of their communities
Yeah.
because, like, I know there's people in this territory who don't drive, so they need the facilities or those programs in their community. So while things have changed, they still have stayed the same, as the old adage goes. So I'm going to go back to my original hard question. What does the future of recreation look like in the Yukon territories?
I think that we will be looking at people still doing a lot of recreation. Outdoor recreation has grown immensely since the pandemic. So that unstructured time, so that if you work a weird shift or you have to work 2 jobs, your recreation can happen when you want it to. I think that that's a really critical piece. And I've seen that shift over the last 10, 20 years here anyways. So that shift to unstructured, being able to access things without having to have somebody at the door taking your money and opening the building and those types of things. Recreation will look like that. We'll still have a lot of investment in sport. We've got some great sport facilities that have new opportunities. We got Arctic Winter Games, but there's this blend
It's
between...
in Yukon this year, right?
It'll be in Yukon in March.
Yes. I
Yes.
just talked to someone from Saskatchewan who's excited to come up. So
Yeah, so that'll be great. So I think that recreation will continue strong because we hold those values close to our heart. We hold the values of having time outside, of the mental well-being that we get when we spend time with family and friends or in nature, right? And those are really important.
So I have a final question for you. It's a very open-ended question, and this is the time for you to speak. Not that you haven't done it for the last 25 minutes. But what's the one thing you want people to take away that we haven't talked about yet? What's the one thing that you, as the contractor for RPAY, a person who is passionate about recreation and parks, you want people to know about what your organization does or what needs to be done to save recreation in Canada?
I think the biggest thing is just to remember that recreation is actually an essential municipal or community service, and I say community for unincorporated municipalities, and recreation is a public good. There's a UN rights of the child to play. as adults, we need the right to recreation. And sometimes it's easy to put recreation behind all those other issues that are going on in communities. But we need to remember that even if we don't have a lot of resources for it, we need to find a way to make it happen. Just for yourself, if you're interested, I'll add this. RPAY, one of the things that we've done is we worked with Midnight Light, which is a local video producing company, and we produced a video called I can't remember what it's called. It's on our website. But if you go,
we can put it into the video.
You absolutely could. It talks about why recreation is an essential service. So it's on.
So for those who are going to be watching this on YouTube or on TV, that will play before my introduction. So you've probably already seen it, and you're probably wondering, what was that video about? That's what the video was about.
So you can find the video at www.rpay.ca, and then just look at under the drop-down menu. So
awesome. And the links to RPA's website will be in the show notes below. Or if you're watching this, head over to crossborderinterviews.ca, and they'll be linked in the show notes on the website as well. Thank you so much,
awesome,
Caroline.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of Municipal Affairs. Now, we want to thank the Association of Yukon Communities for allowing us to come up this year to the 50th anniversary of the Association of Yukon Communities convention in Haines Junction. We are so looking forward to being back in the Yukon later on this year for the territorial election, and also in 2026 when we're back up there in Watson Lake for the 51st annual Association of Yukon Communities convention. Now, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube, or follow us on any of the social media channels. Now, your support means the world to us. So share this episode with your friends, your family, and yes, even your community, and help keep the conversation going. Until next time, stay informed, stay engaged, and we'll be back with a brand new episode of Municipal Affairs soon. Till then.